The swamp taught me to notice small things, how a heron's head sinks 1 inch lower a heartbeat before it spears a fish, how the tannin-stained water darkens around a gator's submerged bulk, how the whine of a 2-stroke engine bounces differently off cypress knees when the tide is ebbing instead of rising. Paying attention keeps an airboat guide alive, and more importantly, it keeps the tourists tipping. But until the morning I found the little dolls, I had never noticed the hum beneath the hum. That second story, the swamp whispers when nobody else is listening. I left the dock behind, Boudreaux's Bait and Ice, with a bachelor party from Houston's 6 hungovers guys in neon tank tops, each trying to outshout the other over the motor. They wanted gators, beer photos, something wild to brag about back home. I obliged, zipping them through the winding canals behind Bayou Benoit, then cutting the fan so the mossy hush could impress them. They snapped pictures, chucked empty cans at the water when I wasn't looking, and by the time we looped back toward the landing, I was already calculating whether their tip would cover the extra fuel. That was when I saw the first one. It bobbed, half hidden in the shade of a leaning cypress, a rag doll no bigger than my hand, its dark yarn hair plastered to its stitched face. What yanked my eyes was the tiny seersucker suit white with pale blue pinstripes, almost an exact miniature of the one Councilman Vernon Duplantis wore to every town hall meeting. A crooked smile of red thread crossed the doll's mouth, but the black glass beads for eyes were sewn in wonky, lopsided, like they'd rolled during stitching and the maker hadn't bothered correcting them. The bachelor bros were busy arguing about who had downed the most jello shots. I cut the engine again, under the pretense of letting them enjoy the prow toward the tree. I scooped the doll with the gaff, shaking off lake weed. The fabric was waterlogged, yet a whiff of spicy perfume clung to it, patchouli and something smoky. Tied to its buttonhole was a scrap of parchment, rolled so tight it looked like the world's smallest cigar. I unfurled it with a fingernail. The ink, somehow untouched by water, formed 6 words. Do Plantis Charity Fund equals private jet. The handwriting reminded me of old-style calligraphy, all flourishes and dagger-sharp serifs. Even before the charter boat tied up that afternoon, the rumour mill in St. Catherine Parish would feast on that morsel. Our boy Vernon chaired the parish disaster relief charity. Every month he practically wept on live TV, begging donors to help hurricane victims. If that parchment meant what I thought it did, Vernon had siphoned cash for joyrides. I stuffed the doll inside my life jacket pocket. The rest of the tour was a blur. Pretend enthusiasm, stage thrill when a gator surfaced, raucous farewells on the pier. After hosing mud off the aluminum hull, I drove back to my little shotgun house on Bayou Teche, doll propped on the dashboard like a gris-gris sentinel. News broke 2 days later. Councilman Duplantis had secretly leased a Gulfstream under his name, paid for by the same disaster fund. The TV reporter's breathless tone matched that crimson thread smile exactly. I sat on my sagging porch, letting the bayou mosquitoes chew my ankles, feeling the Gulf Coast heat grip harder around my ribs. Coincidence, I tried to tell myself, but the doll's parchment had foretold the scandal word for word. I didn't mention the discovery to anyone, not even my cousin Thibodeau, who knows every rumor from New Orleans to Lake Charles. Instead, I began scanning the water during every run, hunting for cloth flashes among bronze lily pads and duckweed. A week passed, nothing but beer cans, a busted crab pot, one faded plastic Mardi Gras baby. Then came Saturday's sunrise charter. The Resnick family from Shreveport wanted a sunrise birding experience. They held binoculars heftier than my boat battery, muttering Latin names for egrets while I idled through a side channel thick with early morning mist, the pink sky reflected in the water like a bruise turning tender. I stayed alert for owl hoots, covertly alert for anything doll-shaped. Near Dead Man's Bend, a cypress trunk split in 2 like the legs of a ballerina, exposing a hollow between the knees. Something red bobbed there. I eased the throttle until the prop barely whispered. The resnicks whispered too. An indigo bunting had just flitted overhead, so nobody objected when I leaned out to grab the little object with my net. This doll wore a blazer the shade of ripe tomatoes, gold buttons no bigger than apple seeds shining through the damp. A string of fake pearls circled its neck. Its yarn hair was streaked grey at the temples. Mayor Elodie Rousseau's campaign uniform, down to the gold pelican brooch stitched on the lapel. The parchment tied to the brooch read, "Rousseau landfill fire kickbacks." I swallowed, the swampy air suddenly gelatinous in my throat. By Monday, everyone knew the inferno at the parish landfill supposedly caused by lightning was arson to hide illegal haze waste dumping. A shell company traced back to Rousseau's cousin had pocketed tidy bribes. Folks filled call-in radio shows with venom. Someone hung a cardboard effigy of Elodie outside City Hall. I started bringing a Ziploc bag on every tour, stashing incriminating dolls in the cooler beside my lunch. The third doll surfaced under a cluster of water hyacinths near Blind Eye Bayou. It had a bolo tie fashioned from thin wire and a scrap of turquoise, unmistakably Senator Cole Babineau's signature accessory. The parchment proclaimed, "Babineau to Roy Shop, lobby graft." The senator's office fell 2 days later after investigative reporters aired taped phone calls of him strong-arming Port Authority contracts 3 for 3. By now, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Each doll predicted a scandal. Each scandal toppled a politician within 48 hours. The dolls floated, only where the swamp runs labyrinthine, places tourists never visit, unless a guide like me takes them. Plenty of guides crisscross our wetlands, but maybe the swamp, whatever force was using it as a mailbox, knew I'd been born here, that I'd listen. But listen to what? And to whom? I had no taste for voodoo pageantry beyond the usual reverence we Cajuns give our dead. My grandmother kept a gris-gris bag pinned inside her bra till the day they lowered her into St. Augustine Cemetery, but she never hexed anyone. She said the swamp does what the swamp wants. Maybe it wanted corruption flushed out, like nutria from a levee burrow. Maybe I was just the janitor. The fourth doll changed everything. It appeared on a hot Wednesday, no charter scheduled, my first afternoon off in weeks. I had motored deep into the Atchafalaya for some quiet fishing. Bass weren't biting. I cracked a beer, let the silence drape around me. Then I saw it, soon from burlap instead of cotton, dressed in a tan sheriff's uniform, complete with hand-stitched badge. My stomach knotted. I only knew one lawman fond of that exact uniform. Sheriff Arlen Thibodeau, my Uncle Arlen, watched me grow up. After my daddy disappeared working offshore, he bought me my first outboard, got me my guide license, looked the other way when teenage me ran trot lines without a permit. My indebtedness to him felt carved into bone. I snagged the doll, debating whether to untie the parchment. When I did, the words blurred because my hand shook. Thibaut dear, evidence locker, dope pillage. No way. Uncle Arlen spent his career busting pill mill doctors, railing against opioids. He lectured school kids about oxy like it was the devil's own gumbo. I reread the parchment 5 times, each time praying the letters would rearrange themselves. They didn't. Back home, I placed the burlap sheriff in the pantry behind a sack of rice, hiding it like contraband. Guilt pressed so heavy I thought my ribs might buckle. By dawn, the scandal hadn't broken. At breakfast, I paced my kitchen, coffee growing cold, as dread fought loyalty. If the pattern held, 24 more hours, and Uncle Arlen would be on the 6 o'clock news, mugshot and all. I drove to the sheriff's office under pretense of delivering crawfish étouffée. Arlen looked tired, grey stubble peppering his jaw, even though he usually shaved smooth as driftwood. He hugged me, thanked me for the food, bragged about next summer's airboat rodeo fundraiser. Nothing in his grin seemed guilty, but fear curdles perception. I heard myself say. Any problems down at Evidence lately? He arched an eyebrow. Not unless you count paperwork. Then he launched into a rant about budget cuts and chain of custody demands. While he talked, I scanned the cluttered bulletin boards, half expecting to see my own photo pinned next to red string. Nothing. I left with stomach acid gnawing like swamp acidity on aluminum hulls. At sunset, I sat on the porch while cicadas whirred like phone lines, the doll heavy in my pocket. If the parchment told true, I could tip off the feds anonymously. Yet if it lied, I'd destroy the man who practically raised me. I had to know. That night I motored to the sheriff's impound warehouse, an old sugarcane refinery beside Route 27. Security lights cast jaundiced halos over rusted tanks. I killed the engine, coasted against the pilings, climbed the ladder. Inside, the air reeked of bleach and diesel. Rows of locked cages housed seized rifles and meth lab glassware. A single deputy dozed in a chair, boots on desk, ball cap over eyes. Sneaking felt wrong, but truth demanded it. I located cage 12B controlled substances. The padlock hung unclasped. Sweat crawled under my collar. I slipped inside. The bins, once orderly, were torn open, pill bottles scattered, some lay empty, labels peeled, file tags missing. Someone had rifled through like a raccoon in a feed shed. My chest tightened. The parchment hadn't lied. A faint scuff behind me. I froze. Uncle Arlen stood at the gate, silhouette spelled by flashlight glare, gun holstered. "Thought I heard something," he said softly. Seeing me, his face sagged with something older than disappointment. "Knew you'd come." My mouth forgot how to mouth. "Unc." He unlocked the gate, motioned me out. "Not here." We walked along catwalks above dark refinery vats until we reached his office, door sealed against eavesdroppers by groaning metal. Inside, file cabinets were piled with forms, but on the desk sat a cardboard box, half full of orange pill bottles. He shut the door. His eyes, usually Bayou calm, churned like floodwater. "I suppose you found one of them dolls." My heart quit beating long enough to make room for terror. "You know about the dolls?" He sighed. "I know they show up when somebody's sins need calling out, and I'm guessing mine washed up this week." He opened a bottle, rattling pills. "It's not what you think." "It looks like you're stealing dope," I said. "Confiscated opioids, yes." He gestured at the refinery vats outside the window. "You know what we do with seized drugs? We burn or bury them. Meanwhile, every hospice in this parish can't afford enough morphine for dying grandmothers. Cops in big cities divert pain meds to black markets, but I divert them somewhere else. Free clinics, vets patching up strays, old folks who can't swallow Tylenol without wincing. I lock 'em destroyed, deliver 'em to folks in need. Wrong on paper maybe, but not in my bones." Thunder rumbled, or maybe that was my pulse. Why not set up a legal program? Bureaucracy would strangle it before our people got help. So I bend the beam. He rubbed his eyes. I didn't think bending would snap it. The voodoo doll wanted him shamed, exposed. But if his motives were mercy, the dolls hadn't lied about facts, only left out nuance. They were judge, jury, executioner, unconcerned with context. Arlen stepped close. "Who else knows?" "Only me," I whispered. "Good. Keep it that way." He tipped the pill bottle's contents into the box. "I'll shut it down, ship everything to DEA, record it proper. Maybe the dolls'll stop." I pictured them bobbing forever, each tiny face stitching a smirk as lives unraveled. I'm not sure they quit once they start. He placed a hand on my shoulder, heavy as his badge. Then we brace. I left the warehouse with heartache, like swamp sludge clinging to boots. That night, no doll floated to foretell Arlen's downfall. Next day, still none. Maybe justice, or whatever spirit animated the cotton mannequins, weighed mercy when deciding which secrets to leak. Or maybe exposing him required someone willing to pluck the doll from the water and carry its message. I'd refused. Relief lasted until Friday dawn. Running a dawn tour for honeymooners from Toronto, I spotted a doll tangled in Spanish moss along a narrow chute. It wore faded denim overalls, frayed cuffs, a khaki sun hat, an outfit I saw each day in the mirror. My skin iced over. The parchment dangled from the brim, letters bold as lightning. Tour guide airboat crash cover-up. The blood whooshed from my head so fast, stars' freckles swarmed my vision. 6 years ago, before I bought my own craft, I worked under a sleazeball named Perry Jolie. One July afternoon, he took a boatload of tourists into the shallows, drunk as crawfish in beer. Prop clipped a submerged stump, the vessel flipped, broke a woman's arm. Perry sobered up fast, begged me to help him invent a narrative. Malfunctioning steering. I went along, afraid of losing my job. Insurance covered damages, but Perry never lost his license. I tucked that guilt away like swamp silt under lily pads. And here the doll held it in yarn palms, daring me. If I ignored it, maybe the scandal wouldn't break. Or maybe it would break worse, exposing that I'd hidden Uncle Anna's secret too. The dolls felt sentient, escalating accountability until everyone complicit was dredged into daylight. I'd finished the honeymooners' tour in robotic days, then locked myself in the boathouse office. The doll stared from the desk, its stitched eyes reflecting fluorescent glare. I wanted to toss it in the engine's prop wash, chop it to lint, but the swamp seemed to watch through warped windows. I dialed Perry Jolie. He answered on the third ring, voice congested with Boilermaker hangover. "Perry, it's Emile," I said. "We need to talk about 2017. A long pause, then, "You crazy calling me about that? It's done." "It isn't done," I said, "unless we make it right." He cursed, voice wobbling. "Statute's passed, and nobody wants that stirred." I looked at the doll. "Someone wants it, and it won't stop stirring." 2 hours later we sat in the sheriff's office. Perry sweating rivers, me trying not to puke. Uncle Arlen listened to our confession, jaw grinding. He might face investigation himself for knowing me and not reporting sooner, but he simply took notes, voice steady. "Truth's like Bayou water after a storm," he said. "Muddy at first, but it clears if you let it settle." We signed statements. Insurance fraud investigators reopened the case. The woman with the broken arm got a proper settlement. Perry surrendered his license. I turned over my doll, parchment included, sealing it in an evidence bag. That night, I expected guilt to crush me, but instead I slept deeper than a wintering gator. No new dolls appeared all week. Maybe the spirits were satisfied, for now. Maybe the swamp just needed someone to admit wrong. 1 month later, thunderheads bruised the horizon as I guided a family from Lafayette along the emerald corridor of Hogwall Bayou. Spanish moss fluttered like gospel choir sleeves. The mother asked if the swamp was haunted. I answered honestly, sometimes. We rounded a bend where lilies formed a carpet so bright it seemed electrified. Nothing floated among them, no dolls, no portents. But a hush hummed beneath the cicadas. The same hush I'd felt before the first doll surfaced. The swamp wasn't done speaking. It never is. I cut the engine, letting the silence breathe. I've kept my eyes sharp since, on my passengers, on the water, on my own reflection in the ripples. The dolls taught me something my grandmother already knew. The swamp always tells the truth, eventually. Maybe it uses yarn and buttons, maybe words spoken through cypress knees. My job is still to guide folks through the tangles. But I listen harder now, because secrets ride the currents the way gators do. Quiet, patient, ready to surface the moment someone dares to look. And when that happens again, I'll be here, engine idling, heart braced, guided by that humming hush beneath the hush, ready, this time, to do right before the dolls have to.